Hello, Dave here, and before we get started with today's episode, I would like to give a few announcements about what's going on in Backlog Land and say the customary thank yous. First of all, over on the Patreon, there are a couple of bonus episodes that came out this month. There's an episode about Star Fox 64 for all patrons, and this month's edition of Tales from the Way backlog is about Punch-Out!, and that is available for the $5 and up patrons. Also, you can find me doing a guest appearance on the Retrospectives podcast about Killer 7, which is a really interesting discussion with a couple of very smart guys, again on the Retrospectives podcast. That's 2 words. I'll throw a link down in the show notes so you can easily find their show. And I'd like to say thank you to the wonderful patrons who help support this show. Big shout out to Chris Nelson, the Top 3 podcast crew, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Ficori, Jill, Jeff, formerly Jerf, Kieran, Soccer, ZNA, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Randall, Jake Martin, Jenny E., Kurt Mattis, and many more. Your support is much appreciated. Anyone who wants to be like them can head to patreon.com/realdavejackson to support the show that way. And with all that being said, let's get on to The Last Guardian. Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, co-host of the Franchise Festival podcast, and Wild Beast Tamer, Chris. Chris, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, it's good to chat with you. Been listening to your show for a while, and we've chatted off and on for a while now. So good to talk with you today. We have a really interesting game to discuss today. That game is The Last Guardian, which is an adventure game developed by Japan Studio and Gen Design and published by Sony for the PlayStation 4 in 2016. If this is your first time listening to the show, thank you for stopping by. Here's how spoilers work on this podcast. We're going to deep dive for a while with no spoilers. And after a certain point, we're going to warn you when the spoilers begin, so you can jump out at that time. You can also check down in the show notes. There's a timestamp for when the spoilers begin. And if you don't care about spoilers, or if you have played The Last Guardian, you can keep on listening, and we'll get into the story in detail after that. So, we have some elevator pitches for people if you don't know what The Last Guardian is. Thank you for clicking on a podcast about a game you don't know anything about. I appreciate you. But The Last Guardian, I say, is Fumito Ueda's trademark minimalist storytelling, but this time it's about a boy and his giant catbird dog. Chris, what would you say?
This is the longest Legend of Zelda dungeon you've ever played, accompanied by the most lifelike video game companion you've ever met.
Yes. 100% agree, and we are going to spend a lot of time talking about that companion because it is truly something special. Before we do, want to talk about some stats, where we played it, how long it took us. I played this on PS5. It took me 13 hours to beat.
Took me about 15 hours, give or take.
And also on PS5.
Oh, yes, of course. PS5 as well. I originally started this on PS4 several years ago, but for this run, I did it strictly on PS5.
Gotcha. So we always begin the episode by talking about what made us want to play The Last Guardian. And whenever there's a kind of series going on, our history with the series, and this is not in its own The Last Guardian series, but it is related to the previous games from this creator and this team. So, Chris, what brought you to The Last Guardian to begin with? Because you played it before I did.
I did. I was very hyped for this game. And that goes back, I rented Eco
You rented
the team's first game back on the PlayStation 2 after, no joke, playing it on a Kmart kiosk.
Oh, hell yeah.
Circa like 2001, and I was very intrigued. Didn't ever finish it, but I got hooked by the Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah.
On PS2. Obviously an unassailable masterwork. I now have it on PS2, PS3, and PS4 because I just can't get enough Shadow of the Colossus. And so when the rumors about this started circulating back in, I want to say it was 2009, I was really excited. Then it disappeared for 6 years and reappeared at E3 2015. And me not having a PlayStation 4 was up the creek, but I was just delighted that this wasn't vaporware.
Yeah.
And so when I finally got a PS4 in 2018, I bought Bloodborne and The Last Guardian to go with it.
Ooh, that's a good duo right there.
Yeah, that's a real greatest hits of the PS4 right there in a dual package.
Yeah.
So, I played about 25% of it back in 2018, got sidetracked, and then when we were talking about doing this show, I figured it was about time to finally get back to it.
Yeah. I love it when the podcast can give other people an excuse to return to a game or try something out for the first time that they always wanted, in your own personal backlog, because that's what I'm doing with most of the show for myself here.
Exactly. It's right there in the name, Tales from the Backlog.
Exactly. Yeah. See, it's not just a name. It's what I'm doing.
It's a philosophy.
Yeah. It's a lifestyle. Yeah. So for me personally, I am relatively new to Ueda's games and Team Ico as they were previously known. I played Shadow of the Colossus for the first time, maybe 2019 or something like that. I never owned a PlayStation before that. So I certainly never played Ico either. So I covered Shadow of the Colossus in episode 31 of Tales from the Backlog. That's with Adam Bucheri, frequent guest on this show.
A mutual buddy of ours, I just have to interject.
Yeah.
He was on our Resident Evil 7 episode over on Franchise Festival.
That's right.
He is an absolute delight.
Yes, he is. Absolutely. So shout out to you, Adam, if you're listening out there. And episode 80 of Tales from the Backlog is about Ico. I finally went back and played that. That is with Josh from the Still Loading podcast, another delightful person. So shout out to Josh. And both of those episodes, if you want to go listen to them. So The Last Guardian was, for me, completing the trilogy. And obviously, well, I guess if you didn't listen to those episodes, you don't know. So I'll tell you, I adore Shadow of the Colossus, even though I was so late to it. It's one of those games that I heard like unlimited hype about for decades almost. And then when I finally played it, it lived up to the hype. It was one of those things that did live up to the hype. And I liked Ico. It's a kind of complicated going back to that early game, but I really appreciate it. And I had a good amount of enjoyment from actually playing it myself too. So The Last Guardian was always there, but it took me finally playing Shadow of the Colossus and then Ico to finally be like, okay, I'll give The Last Guardian a try. I had always heard about, technical issues and long loading times and things, but I felt like the PS5 might help with that. And I think it did.
Yeah.
And it's also on the PS Plus catalog. If you subscribe to that, you, quote, have it for free right now. So you can just go play it. So that is what brought me to this. And to get into some quick opening thoughts here at the beginning, I felt like this game was kind of a mix of both of the previous games, though it reminded me more of Ico than Shadow of the Colossus. And despite having the feeling that you can feel the development hell that this game kind of went through and the long development cycle, its origins as a PS3 game, you can feel that when you play this. But this game is magical. It's wonderful. I really, really love this. I could not stop playing it when I was, I said I played it for 13 hours. That was maybe like 4 or 5 play sessions. Like I legitimately couldn't put this game down. A lot of it has to do with Trico, the companion, and kind of the mystery surrounding where you are, what this place is, the hidden story behind it all. So we're going to dig into all of those things. I'm really excited too, but I really love this game.
Yeah, I was really struck by it. I had almost the opposite play experience of you, where I generally can only take a little bit of this at a time.
Okay.
I played it kind of in 1 hour play sessions over a span of weeks because... So this game is just wildly beautiful. There's no getting around the fact that it is... It came out in 2016. For my money, it is still one of the best-looking PlayStation games you can play. A lot of that is down to, the art direction.
Yeah.
Like, just even the architecture. It's vast in a way that boggles the mind, and I'm into that. You know, I guess Lovecraftian isn't the right touch point for it, but it's got that larger-than-life kind of vibe that I really like, and that Shadow of the Colossus and Ico had too. That said, the gameplay of this is almost constantly at odds with what you want to do. Like, executing your goal in the game has, as an impediment, the very controls of the game. It's almost uniquely clunky.
Yeah.
In a way that, to be honest, I feel like games haven't been since the 90s. I think this almost felt like a PS1 game to me, like a really fancy PS1 game, in that it takes controls in really surprising directions. And that can be a bummer for, you get home from work and want to play a game, but it can also unlock this kind of world of magic, like you were talking about, that this is not like anything else you've played. Double-edged sword.
Yeah, absolutely. And, worth noting that Ico and Shadow of the Colossus are also famously weird to control. Even the remake of Shadow of the Colossus doesn't feel like a modern game, control-wise. But there was a hint of this in Shadow of the Colossus, and we'll really dig into this, but I want to put it out on Front Street. But the way that the game controls, and like you said, kind of fighting it to get things accomplished, to me, enhance the story and the kind of relationship between your main character and your companion in this game, which is, we can have a little debate about whether that is the intent, whether it's a happy accident, or whether it's just a plain detractor from the game. Because I think that you could see it any of those ways, and that's what makes this so interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think it would be a little bit reductive to refer to it strictly as a shortcoming.
Yeah.
Because at least part of it must be intentional. The difficulty you have, conveying, communicating non-verbally, so to speak, with this creature, is just, it's inherently challenging. And I really like that. I like that part of it, even when I was like, Trico, for goodness sake, I've been, jumping up and down on your back for 5 full minutes. What are you doing, buddy? But that is so part and parcel of the magic of the experience. The game is about communication and the difficulties therein. The bigger challenge that I ran into was, and this is true in all of Fumito Ueda's games, but by golly, there's a lot of input lag, and not not like you're playing an old 8-bit game on a modern console input lag, but like the main character in this. I never timed it, but it feels like a full second to charge up to moving. When he's from a standing position, it's like he needs to get running in place a little bit, and then he starts moving. He stops kind of slowly. Just a lot of stuff like that. Just the actual controlling the avatar was a little rough around the edges in a way that I found challenging. That part I feel like maybe is a little bit... I don't want to say it's unintentional. I think it's part and parcel of having such a well-animated character. There's always this tension in 3D games between how realistically a character is modeled in their actions and how quickly they react to your inputs.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think this one comes out as kind of a cautionary tale of having extremely detailed, well-realized avatar actions at the expense of input.
Yeah, I can definitely see that for sure. And we'll put a pin in this and we'll revisit this because this is definitely it plays in with basically everything about the game in a way that not a lot of other games, in a way that I couldn't say about a lot of other games. I'll put it that way. But there is a lot to dig into. It is an endlessly interesting game.
Yeah.
And good thing for us and for everybody listening is we have the time to dig into it. So we're going to listen to a bit of music, and then when we come back, we are going to talk about the story, and we are going to intertwine gameplay talk in this episode with the story because they are truly inseparable here. So let's enjoy that music, and we will come back. In The Last Guardian, the game is framed as a narration by the main character much later as an older man. In the game, the character is a young boy. He is not named, just known as the boy whenever narration happens. The narrator is voiced by Hiroshi Shirokuma. Although this is not a real language being narrated, we'll say it's subtitled, it's a made-up language. The opening credits of the game kind of get you started in an interesting way. So the opening credits start, it shows a picture book full of animals, ranging from normal stuff, like you got armadillos and stuff like that, and then all the way up to fantastical beasts like griffins, unicorns, and the last page is about an animal called a Trico. And a Trico kind of looks like a cat-bird mix-up.
I think that's an apt way to describe. I think you referred to it elsewhere in the notes as a cat-bird dog.
Yes, in my elevator pitch, a cat-bird dog.
Yes. Yeah, I like that.
And the name Trico supposedly comes as a portmanteau of the Japanese words for bird and cat. It can also mean in Japanese prisoner or baby bird. This is all according to people who speak Japanese, as I don't. But that is kind of a description of the Trico. It is cat-shaped, but it has feathers. It's got some horns on its head. Yeah. So the boy wakes up in a cave, and he remembers a quote. Wakes up, remembers this quote, "Be amongst the chosen." And he turns around to find himself face to face with a Trico, which supposedly are these legendary man-eating monsters. This Trico, however, is chained to the ground and is badly wounded by a bunch of spears. And so the game gets started. You have to go over and help the Trico out by pulling the spears out of it and then releasing it from the chain. And then they escape together from this room they were stuck in, this cave, and they go out into this enormous fortress-type structure. And that's basically like the story push is you're just trying to get out of here, and you have to work together with this creature that all the legends say is this dangerous man-eating beast. And you definitely get the feeling that this one is dangerous, for sure, but you have no choice but to work together.
Yeah, I like that they kind of set the tone for how dangerous this creature can be, because he flings you like a piece of paper. Yeah. When you first, as the boy tried to release him. So there is this really strong element of danger early on, and the game does force you a bit to take it on faith that the creature is not going to hurt you, even though it could.
Right. It definitely could. And like you said, like very early, I think it's like you pull out one spear and it bashes you across the room.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
So definitely. But you really have no choice. There's some other mystery to this. The boy wakes up. He's covered in these weird tattoos, these weird markings. You don't know what this place is that you're in. And your only companion, your only source of help in this is this supposed man-eating beast. And I think that the core theme of this game is establishing and then evolving and, you know, working with that relationship between the boy and Trico. So we're going to spend a lot of time here talking about how this works, both through gameplay and story purposes. We talked about before the show, if we separated these sections, we would literally just say the same things in each section, because this game is kind of uniquely set up in that way. But I love that the main thing in this game, kind of similar to Eco, but more evolved and more foreign in this game, is it's all about the boy and Trico, their relationship, how it evolves, how things change between them. It's just a really interesting setup.
Yeah, it's downright beautiful, and I think this type of story wouldn't work nearly as well if it were told in a more traditional way. I think we get maybe 3 cutscenes throughout this entire game, and the rest of the story is experienced almost entirely through direct interaction and reaction from Trico. So it brings you into the story in a way that I think only a game can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there would be a way for another medium to show this relationship to you, but there are definite enhancements from doing this all mostly through gameplay. Like you want Trico to help with something and it doesn't understand you, or it gets distracted and you get frustrated, and that all works. But before we get too deep, let me paint a better picture for what a Trico looks like. First of all, the Trico is huge. You are a child, I don't know, 10, 12-year-old kid, something like that. And the Trico is many, many, many times bigger than the boy. So you literally have to climb to get up on its back. So, the danger comes from that too, from its sheer size and like the thought like, okay, what if it just gets sick of me or something like that? What if it actually is this man-eating beast and it was just letting me help it get out, and now it's mealtime or something?
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I actually managed to fall off its back once or twice when it was jumping.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
You can get inadvertently injured by it even in the course of gameplay, just kind of emergent. It's not scripted or anything, but your character can get hurt just due to the sheer size of the beast.
Yeah, 100%. You have to grab onto its feathers when it's going to jump, or else you will tumble off. So, like I said, the Trico has a kind of feline body shape, kind of feline movements to it all. Its ears look like cat ears, but the whole body is covered by feathers. It has bird-like legs and feet. It has 2 small wings on its back, but they are undeveloped. They're not fully grown, so it can't fly. And it has these 2 small horns on its head.
Yep.
It has cat-like eyes with like that kind of reflective lens. I don't know, eye parts I forgot from my biology classes, but you shine a light on a cat, you see the reflection.
Yeah.
And its eye color can change depending on its mood. So that is a way that they convey Trico's emotion to you, along with its movements, because you mentioned animation for the boy earlier. The animation work that went into Trico is really, really impressive to me.
Yeah, for my money, it's still the best I've ever seen. I don't know if you have any pets, Dave.
I do, yeah.
Oh, okay. This creature reminds me so much of one of my 2 dogs. Like, just even down to the way that it moves. It is more cat-like than dog-like, but some of its reactions are very dog-like. Like the way that it reacts to the main character being in pain or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And just even down to the facial animations of this creature. Like, this is a fantastical creature. I've never seen one in real life. And the fact that I could understand immediately what the emotions of this creature were, just based on its movements, is, I don't know, that's a real testament to the animators there.
Yeah, the attention to detail with facial animations and body language from Trico is really, really good. And if you're at all familiar with mostly dogs, like you said, it did remind me of a lot of dog body language, but cats too, in the way that it moves. So if you're at all familiar with like, oh, okay, like its ears are down, that means it's cautious, it's nervous about something. So like immediately you grab onto that, and it's really well realized. The movements, the jumps, it's very graceful despite its size. So that's where the kind of feline side of it comes from. Despite the fact that it is so big that it is, stomping around, the ground shakes when it lands. A couple times when like Trico jumps down into a body of water and you get this like enormous wave just from how big the thing is.
Yeah, it's great. The wave is even necessary to solving a puzzle at one point, which I was surprised by. But yeah, I did think that it was funny. I maybe unintentionally so, but I did get kind of a chuckle out of the fact that Trico, I'm not sure if he ever has a good landing.
Yeah.
In the course of the game when he's jumping to another platform. Like he narrowly grabs onto a ledge so many times over the course of this game.
Yeah.
Only outnumbered, I guess, by the number of times that I barely grabbed onto a ledge.
Exactly. Yeah. Like in doing research for how to animate Trico, they must have watched a bunch of videos of cats like almost making it onto the ledge they're trying to jump onto or something. Yeah. The movements for Trico are really great too. The way that, it dips its head to get through passageways, or even if the passageway is Trico sized, which there's a alarming number of Trico sized passageways in this fortress. But I don't know, it just feels lifelike when you're going through an enclosed space, crawling or like scrambling through smaller passages, all the jumps, the way that it climbs, everything about it, it just feels super lifelike and very readable in a way that like us in the real world, dog and cat owners will immediately identify with.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way towards making this game playable, because a less readable companion, given that you don't have any like UI, you don't have any map like you would in a more traditional game. I at least found a lot of the solutions of the puzzle coming down to me poking around a room and watching what Trico was doing. And he doesn't have that, Navi from Legend of Zelda, like, here's how you solve the puzzle, Link. You can tell that he's kind of inspecting the environment as well. So it's not here's the solution, but rather that Trico, even when you're not directly interacting with him, has his own kind of internal life related to the environment.
Yeah, that helps a lot with gameplay, and it helps to give Trico a lot of personality too, because a lot of times when there's something novel in an environment, you will probably need it to solve a puzzle.
Right.
And maybe you don't see it right away, but like, let's say there's a thing hanging from the ceiling and very cat-like, Trico will go over and start batting at it and playing with it or something. Or Trico will get distracted by there's this neon gas in the environment that he
Trico loves that gas.
Yeah. So whenever that happens, like, okay, this is important for something. I can use this to lure Trico somewhere, or maybe I have to shut it off to get Trico to focus and move forward. It does feel like you're working with a living thing with its own personality and its own interests in the world around you, similar to, if you take your dog to an unfamiliar spot, your dog's going to explore it and see what's out there. So it feels the same way here. Yeah.
I really like that few moments when you first get to a new area each time and you get off of Trico and you're inspecting and he's inspecting, and then you kind of come together to try to figure out a puzzle.
Exactly. Yeah. Another thing that lends personality and a little bit of helpful gameplay stuff too is the sound design for Trico, which I think is really, really well realized. Trico is very vocal depending on what's going on, depending on the context. There's a vocalization to let you know that Trico is getting ready to do a big jump, so you got to hold on tight so you don't fall off down into the bottomless pits. Trico, there are threats in the game. Trico will, roar at them, makes nervous noises when something's creeping him out. There's a lot of personality and, again, gameplay function to vocal design, sound design, too, with Trico.
Yeah, the further you go, the more he starts to whine when you leave him, the more he starts to whine. And A, it foregrounds that relationship, which is the core of the game. But B, it just breaks your heart. You're like, come on, buddy, I'll be back in a minute, I swear. Like, don't freak out too much. It's just breaks your heart.
Yep. And as you go, you learn more about what those sounds mean, just like you would if you spent time with a real animal. And you can, you said you're a dog owner, so you can discern what different vocalizations from your dog means.
Exactly.
So you get that same kind of learning process with Trico here too. It's just, I have like almost nothing but good things to say about like the design, the animation, the sound design of this creature. You can tell, like, I don't want to say that this is why they spent so long making this game, but you can tell they were like, this has to work. This is the entire game. If Trico doesn't work, the entire game is going to fall apart.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that's it. Whether it's, the AI portion, because for all the world, Trico just feels like a living, thinking creature.
Yeah.
I'm sure it helps that it's not a human, so that probably helps elide some of that uncanny valley stuff. But the other side of it just is the fact that Trico is so extensively animated and articulated. Every one of his feathers, as far as I could tell, is moving independently. And he's got a lot of feathers. So I just can't imagine how much this would have chugged on the PS3.
Yeah. Almost thankful that it did get delayed to the point where I'm now easily playing it on a PS5, and that's probably helping out a lot.
Yeah, there's a little technical fun fact that I just have to drop in here about this game on the tech side, is for players who have a physical version of the game, a disc version of it, and a disc-based PlayStation 5, if you put the disc into the PS5 and don't patch the game, it will actually run at an unlocked 60 frames per second, even though the game, traditionally they patched it back in the PS4 days to run it at a locked 30 frames per second. Mm-hmm. I didn't test this out because my understanding is that it breaks a couple of the puzzles, and this game looks so gorgeous at the 30 frames per second. I was like, I don't need anything more,
Yeah.
But that is just a fun little technical quirk about it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, sometimes you do run into that with higher frame rates, making puzzles especially sometimes unsolvable because the way that they're tied in with that. But yeah, that's interesting. So in the game itself, as you're navigating through this fortress, as you are trying to get out, the boy and Trico need to work together to solve a bunch of puzzles. The way that you described it, Chris, as the world's largest Zelda dungeon or something like that. It is really a series of navigation and environmental puzzles. Lots of, there's a door or a gate that's locked. We need to figure out how to open the gate. So stuff like that. The boy is often not able to do it all by himself or not able to reach the place where he will be able to pull a lever and open the door. So you need Trico's help. And that's where the big gameplay side of this comes in. And of course, this reinforces characters and themes of the game too. The fact that you need Trico's help, but at the end of the day, Trico doesn't speak your language. Trico's an animal. And sometimes Trico just feels like he has a mind of his own. So sometimes maybe you need him to lift you up somewhere, but he's distracted by a chain over there. Or sometimes Trico's hungry and he won't do anything until you give him some food. There are these barrels that you find that you have to feed to Trico. Barrels filled with this lovely neon goo, again, that he loves so very much. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you will... because you have a button that you can use to like call Trico, or you can point in a direction and kind of gesture like, over there is something, and he'll figure out there's the thing over there. I need to pull this thing. But sometimes you'll hit that button and he'll just look at you, just kind of stare straight. It's like, when it's midnight and I've let my dog out for the last time for the night, and I'm ready to go to bed, and I want him to come inside, and I'm like calling him, and he's just staring right back at me.
Man, it is the exact same thing. It is the exact same thing. That's all I could think of when I was trying to get Trico to solve a puzzle in this was like, yep, I know that look, know. And did you ever get Trico, for me at least, sometimes he would, if I gave him too many commands, he would start kind of making annoyed noises at me.
Ooh. I don't remember that in particular, but there were times when I did mash that button and it did not help.
Yeah. When I was trying to have him move around an environment, and sometimes I would direct him in opposite directions too much, he'd start going like, wah, wah, like making this kind of annoyed, squawking sound.
Mm-hmm. The fact that he does react to what you do, and sometimes he seems like he doesn't understand. Sometimes he seems like maybe he does understand, but he doesn't feel like it. Sometimes he, like you said, seems annoyed at you for telling him what to do so much. My dog gets the same way. I can tell. Sometimes I'm like, sit, and he's like, nah, I don't feel like it right now. And my dog's extremely vocal, so he'll let me know loudly.
Yep.
And then sometimes like you want Trico to go over and it feels like he doesn't understand or doesn't want to, whatever. And this is kind of like that thing that I mentioned before we started digging into the story. Like, this is characterization for Trico, but also it directly impacts your gameplay experience. So I have heard out there from people who like and don't like this game that this is the main source of frustration throughout the game, is trying to get Trico to do exactly what you want him to do. And so you can look at it a number of ways. Like I said, you can look at it as this is a decision by the designers to have Trico sometimes disobey you or not understand you, because that's what an animal might do sometimes. Or, just not understand you, because why would the animal understand, commands you're giving it? You just met a couple hours ago. You can look at it as the AI doesn't work the way that it should in the game, and it's a technical shortcoming of the game. I choose to look at it as the more, romantic view of it, I guess. The way that it's at least somewhat intentional and helps with the characterization. And I talked about this in the Shadow of the Colossus episode about the horse aggro, in that it's plausible to me that it's a PS2 game and they didn't have, great AI for the horse, but that horse did feel like it had its own personality as a result also. And it's just so expanded here in this game because it's the whole game.
Yeah, this does feel like an evolution on aggro, for sure. It feels like Trico is almost a combination of aggro and the Colossi from Shadow of the Colossus. It's like the two kind of came together and made a Trico. You know what's funny is I don't think that technical shortcomings are inherently bad when they do contribute to the theme of a piece of art. Like, constraints can be very important for art. And I would say that this is one of those scenarios where even if it is an AI programming issue, it only gets in the way, I would say, maybe 20% of the time. I can think of a handful of puzzles that I feel like I got through them through dumb luck. I was trying to communicate something to Trico that I had just off the top of my head where you need to make Trico dive. And you got me. It worked out eventually, but it was tough. But as far as technical constraints go, I'm thinking back to like the original Resident Evil. And this is a game that was supposed to be a first-person shooter when they were originally creating it. And they couldn't get the frame rate good enough with the level of detail they wanted on the original PlayStation. And so they shifted over to these weird cinematic camera angles. And so what was a technical constraint became one of the core parts of the series for a decade. These cinematic camera angles that set the tone for horror in games. So I think that the two dovetail neatly together.
Yeah, and I can say without a shadow of doubt, if Trico worked perfectly, and I'm saying that in air quotes, quote, works perfectly, responds to every command exactly the way that you want him to, this game would be worse.
It would.
If that were the case. You would not develop the sort of connection because your ability to interact with Trico evolves as the game goes on too. You start out with just a simple press the button to yell Trico's name, and it evolves past that. I won't say how, but it does. And if Trico was just this perfect machine, it would lose a lot of that lifelike quality that is so core to the relationship, the theme of, its relationship with the boy. The game would be worse. It would be noticeably worse. And I agree with you that, quote, shortcomings or friction points or things like that can really enhance your experience with art. And we've talked about that several times on this podcast, including one discussion all about the value of things like that things that are not necessarily fun. Like, is it fun to try to, spend 5 minutes trying to get Trico to look in the direction you want him to look? No, it's frustrating, but this is an animal. They're trying to create a lifelike animal. And if you really want to commit to that realism, this should be part of it.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like Papers, Please. Like, would Papers, Please be more fun, quote unquote, if it was a little bit cleaner and easier to navigate? Your papers didn't keep all covering each other up on the desk that you're working with on the interface. Yes, every game could be an endless runner, and there's a place for those. But sometimes the value that you're driving towards is at odds with fun, and not everything can be fun.
Yeah, and frankly, if video games are to be appreciated as art the way that the both of us want them to, and the way that we both appreciate and the way we're talking about this game, we have to accept that not everything is going to be pure fun. There's going to be frustration because not all art is pure happy joy time all the time. So it's really valuable to have that friction in this game. And that part you talked about with the diving, that was frustrating because I didn't know how. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't know how.
Exactly.
And like you, it happened eventually, and I was like, okay, I hope I don't have to do that again. And I didn't have to do that again. So it turned out to be fine overall. But another nice touch about Trico that I just wanted to make a little note of, it's a little characterization thing. Trico's a shy eater. And it starts out right in that first room in the game. You have to feed him in order to help him get some strength to stand up and help out. You find the food barrels around, and there might even be an achievement for giving Trico all the barrels or a certain number of them.
Yeah, I think so. There is some kind of completionist element of finding all of the barrels.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to it doesn't have like a mechanical difference, I don't think. Not like the lizards and stuff in Shadow of the Colossus, but that is this game's version of like secrets. Like if you explore in nooks and crannies, often that is what you'll be rewarded with is food for Trico. But when you give it to him, he kind of just like looks at you. He's shy. And so you have to go to the other side of the room or else he won't eat it. So it's a really nice touch. Very small thing overall, but it pays off. It's good.
I don't know if you noticed this, and it might have just been my imagination, because with something like Trico, you are always wondering how much am I imbuing this character as opposed to what's actually in the game. But I found later on in the game when I would throw barrels towards him, he would be nervous about them. But if I picked them up, walked them over, and sat them down, he'd be much more inclined to eat them. So over time, I started gently bringing him barrels as opposed to throwing them to him.
Yeah. And I think back to the first time in that very first room, and I don't consider this to be a spoiler, it's like minute 5 in the game. In that first room, you are afraid of Trico, so I'm like standing as far away as I can and hurling the barrels so that I don't have to get close to him.
Pulling a Donkey Kong.
Yeah. Speaking of, so we talked about all of these nice things and partnership and Trico helping out. Trico is, again, this big, potentially dangerous animal, and there are threats in the game to the boy and to Trico himself. So the boy can't fight. It is, no, it's not similar to the other ones, because Eco can fight and Wander can fight also. The boy cannot really fight. There are a couple of like maneuvers you can do to help yourself out, but you can't pick up a sword and hit something with it in this game. It's
and even the maneuvers are very clunky. They're unreliable.
And I did not know about them as I was playing. I found out about them after the fact, just by reading. So limited vocabulary for dealing with hostile things in the game, of which there are plenty. So you have to let Trico protect you. And this is another thing that helps out with characterization. Trico, we want to say he's a willing fighter, but he's not really. He'll do it, and he seems compelled to do it. But another thing I really like about it is after it's all over, you have to calm Trico down. You have to go pet him. You have to soothe him. You can tell that this affects him in some way. Yeah. And I found that to be really effective. You know, gameplay wise, it's always a puzzle to try to get Trico to attack the things, keep yourself safe until it's all over. And then you have this extra thing where it's like Trico's really freaked out. You have to go soothe him, calm him down. Yeah,
I really like that too. I like that as the game went on as well, I discovered that you can kind of help Trico during combat, which is not immediately apparent. And I'm not sure that it really matters, quote unquote, because I'm not aware of Trico being able to lose encounters. I'm not sure.
Yeah. They're like enemies will throw spears and stuff like that. And so like part of what I did, because I can't fight, my thing was always like stay out of harm's way. And a lot of times the best place to be is hanging onto Trico's back.
Oh, so, interesting.
At least for me.
I usually tried to pull them away and distract them because while they were coming after me, Trico could smash them.
Right.
I like that you can also knock them down. You can knock them over and pull their, at least the soldiers, you can pull their helmet off.
Yeah, at a certain point, you do get a kind of like shoulder bash move that maybe you had the whole time and they just never told you had it, but I'm not completely sure.
I think you do have it the whole time, if only because every time that I started this game up, I would be just pressing all of the buttons if a couple of days had gone by. And at least a few times I ran into enemies before it taught me how to do it. And I thought, what's that about?
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, the safest place to me was often like on Trico's back, just hanging on for dear life. And then sometimes you'll get a spear sticking into him and you can go out. You have a dedicated button to pull the spears out. So that was kind of like my job during combat, was to help Trico out. And I don't know if you let things go too long, if they can kill him or not. I wasn't going to find out. I wanted to help the boy out.
Yeah, I was the same. It never got that far because I was pulling the spears out or getting the encounter over as quickly as possible. Because whether he can die or not, I didn't want to see Trico hurt.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of like a nice little segue into kind of wrapping up thoughts about the story and the gameplay. Again, the story is, I think there's two main things going on. There's a mystery to the whole thing, similar with every game that this studio, the main designer Ueda has made. There's always a big mystery. You don't know what this place is, why it was built, things like that. So you're kind of figuring that out. And that is told to you to some extent, though they hide a lot of details from you too. The other part of it is, and more importantly, that growing relationship between the boy and Trico. And over 13 hours of doing all these things we talked about, struggling to get Trico to respond, things that I'm going to save for the spoiler section, of course, but there are a lot of really affecting moments from both sides, from things Trico does, things the boy does, things that they go through together. It ended up being a really, really surprising story with what is actually revealed to you is going on, how you ended up there in the first place, stuff like that. And then it is a really touching story as well when you see what both of them go through together.
Yeah, I agree.
So in order to not say too much, we'll put a pin in story talk for now. And we'll take a break. We'll listen to a bit of music. We'll come back. We'll talk about the way this game looks. We'll talk about the music. So you mentioned much earlier when we were doing our kind of general opening thoughts, talking about the visual design of this game and how you said that this is one of the most beautiful games currently available on any PlayStation.
Oh, yeah,
and
for sure.
From an art design, architecture perspective, this is pretty damn hard to beat. If you're looking for like intense 4K visual realism, this is not that game, but I don't really care when this, the place that you're in this game, because the whole thing takes place in this fortress. This place is, it's magical. It's huge. It's got that thing that Ico and Shadow of the Colossus both did with like this just impossible scale of how big this place is. Like I said, all of these, doorways are Trico sized, which is odd, but it all fits because this place just feels so impossibly big. The way that they designed this place to look is really impressive too.
Yeah, it feels like the only other developer who I can think of who accomplishes architecture at this scale is maybe FromSoft in like the Souls and Elden Ring games, where there is this impossible vastness, like something out of Dreams. But even they, I don't think, quite accomplish the I don't even have a word for it. It's just it's the biggest architecture you could ever imagine. It's just you feel like an ant.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it helps with that feeling of that fish out of water feeling, we'll say, because this place is very obviously not made for you as a boy. Everything's too big for you. That's why you need Trico's help to reach, ledges and stuff like that.
Right.
But there is that kind of impossible scale to it all. The place itself is huge. It's built, surrounded by these impossibly large cliffs. And then below you are these impossibly large chasms. When you look down, you see clouds in this game. Maybe that's an artistic choice so they don't have to show you what's at the bottom, but it is an unfathomable size to this place, which really helps with the sense of wonder as you're exploring. And every time you get a vista in this game, you just look out. I have a bunch of screenshots where I was just like, wow, like look at this place.
Yeah, it's consistently breathtaking. And I find it particularly impressive that they accomplish that without much in the way of adornment. It's not, I would say, a Spartan environment. There are some flourishes, but by and large, it is very, it's very unadorned. It's a lot of massive stonework without much in the way of refined surfaces. Yeah,
and that's one of the things that Ueda is kind of known for, that minimalist storytelling, and environments in their games are one of the big ways where that stands out. Like there's not a lot of extraneous detail. And it's important in a game like this where you enter a new room and the thing that you're trying to figure out is, what do I have to interact with in order to move on? There's not a lot of distracting things that end up not being important. And that's not to say that there's no detail in the place or that there is no, stone carving or anything like that. There's plenty of that. It's just, it's very easy to tell what's important in the room because there's no distraction in the way that they've designed the place. It still, to me, looks detailed, looks impressive from that perspective, but I was never confused about what's actually important for me as the player.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest game design challenges, I would say, over pretty much from the beginning of like the PlayStation 4, Xbox One era in the early 2010s, as visual fidelity went up and level of detail went up, is that it is challenging to create a quote-unquote convincing immersive environment that also makes it clear what the player's objective in that environment is. And there are shortcuts around this. The famous, what are they like? The
yellow paint.
Yeah, the yellow paint. That is kind of an elegant shortcut to resolve this. But it's interesting to see Ueda take a different path of making the environment so unadorned that generally 9 times out of 10, your objective is clear just from observing the natural environment.
Yeah, 100%. That also extends to color, and again, might be a holdover from this being a PS3 game, the famously brown and gray generation.
Yeah.
But it's not a super colorful game, and the colors that are in there are a little bit muted, like greens for plants or something like that. But the things that stand out, there's a lot of neon colors here and there to denote, magical things. Purples and blues. Some parts of Trico have that same coloring. So you kind of get the feeling or the reinforcement that this is a fantastical beast we're dealing with here. There's magic at play here.
Yeah.
So that helps with that. I also liked how outdoor areas are very, very bright.
Yeah.
Or at least it might be my picture. Maybe my TV is not calibrated, because I'm having the same kind of feeling about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where I don't think that's an artistic choice in that game.
I was going to reference Final Fantasy VII Rebirth specifically because that takes this to an entirely new level. That iris issue with brightness outside versus darkness inside.
Right.
I think the effect is much more successful here.
Yeah, because you spend a lot of time inside in this game, and so when you step out into the sunlight, it's going to be bright.
Yeah, exactly. But also when you step inside it, it's just for a moment. It doesn't generally get in the way of gameplay, which is nice.
No, definitely not. But it did feel like an artistic choice to have the outside feel very bright.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a lot of cinematics. You mentioned earlier there's only a handful of cutscenes, rendered cutscenes like that. There is not that many of those. And again, it's back to this kind of minimalist style of storytelling. A lot of the story is conveyed through little moments. There are a bunch of shorter cutscenes where maybe Trico makes a jump and then there's a scramble to get up to a ledge, or something's collapsing and there's a big running away section as a bridge collapses beneath you or something like that. A lot of moments like that, but what I would say are like the very expensive cutscenes are pretty few and far between here.
Yeah, those cutscenes where something was happening to the environment, something alarming, and you needed to react to it a moment later, reminded me so much of, again, this takes me back to this as kind of a really advanced PlayStation 1 game, because it reminded me so much of those cutscenes, very brief cutscenes in PS1 Final Fantasy games where something big was going on in the environment, and you still retained control of your character. And so a lot of the time in the big cutscenes here, because they aren't pre-rendered, you can move your avatar around, have him shuffle around on Trico, or walk around nervously on a bridge that's about to fall apart. It's like it redirects the camera, but still allows you the freedom of movement within the space, which I think is a cool way to not detract from the interactability of it.
I'm glad you mentioned the camera too, because the camera, especially in those outdoor sections, will often zoom way out or kind of frame up the picture in a way to kind of show off the landscape. In a really cinematic and impressive way too. Again, like the impossible scale of this place, they want you to really take that in. Maybe as you're climbing up something precarious, and really internalize like, well, if this thing breaks and I fall, this is going to be bad,
Yeah, it's got this very like early to mid 2000s Japanese game design style, where it's like Western developers, I think, broadly adopted controllable cameras earlier. And Japan was a little slower to adopt it for a lot of good reasons. It limits your options as far as highlighting environmental details, and it can be challenging for players who aren't familiar with controlling both an avatar and a camera simultaneously. But this has this kind of awkward transitional phase that a lot of games did in the mid-2000s out of Japan, where the camera is controllable most of the time, but sometimes it redirects to something it wants you to look at.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting for a game from 2016 to have that. You just don't see that very much anymore, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, a real emphasis on making sure that you see what they want you to see, we'll say. Yeah. Yeah,
very like designer-led versus player-led philosophies.
Yeah. Another thing about this presentation of this game is that there is no real UI. You just see the action, and another, obvious minimalist choice for the game. Shadow of the Colossus had, a health bar, a stamina bar, things like that. This game has nothing like that at all. It's just the game, just the scene.
Yeah, and even the pause menu, I think, shows return to checkpoint, return to title. You can go to an options menu to impact like screen brightness, and then it's just back to game. It's almost a pause screen from a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that choice is also pretty successful. I never felt the lack of a UI in this. I think the closest you could come to wanting a UI, assuming that your character can't be damaged enough that they die, and Trico can't be damaged enough that they die, which I never tested either enough to find out if either were true. In that case, maybe a health bar would be helpful. But given how it's designed, I think the biggest lack is just what you find in a lot of modern games, like a compass to tell you which way you're going to your objective.
Mm-hmm.
And even that would harm the experience by being included. Like the purpose here is the journey. The purpose is figuring out how to get out of the room you're in.
Yeah, I agree. And I can't think of any information that I thought was crucial that the game did not tell me in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they went with a more artistic way to do that, such as like instead of a marker telling you where the lever is that you have to pull to open the gate, maybe Trico will look at it or something like that. But I got the information, so I don't need things filling up the screen here. Like a mini map would not really have done much for this game.
They'd really only distract you from keeping your attention squarely on Trico, and building that relationship by better understanding his body language is core to the story. It's core to what you're doing. So I, for one, am glad that they did not include any additional UI elements.
Yeah, well said. The music in The Last Guardian is credited to Takeshi Furukawa, who I looked through a little bit of credits. Fun fact, credited with the GoldenEye 007 compositions, which is interesting 2 games to have worked on from the same creator here.
Man, that is as fun a fact as you could have found.
for previous works, yeah.
That's a wild resume.
Yeah, so no music for a lot of the game. During the regular gameplay sections, it is just the sound of your footsteps, environmental sounds, Trico sounds, stuff like that. But during key moments in gameplay, or especially during cinematics, music will kick in. And when it does kick in, it still, in my experience, hangs back quite a bit to just kind of set a mood for the scene rather than... Like, I keep making comparisons to Shadow of the Colossus, but as their previous game. But the music in Shadow of the Colossus is much catchier, much hookier, we'll say. As if being catchy is the only sign of quality or something like that. But it is hookier. It shifts. It has much more memorable melodies to it. And I think that that's intentional in that game because those melodies signify different parts of those Colossus battles in that game. But in here, it's a much more cinematic, kind of laid back, light piano, strings in a lot of those environmental sections. And then when you have intense moments, it ratchets up, and the sound of it can get quite sinister in this game in a way that is really, really effective because some things that happen in this place, there is some sinister stuff going on.
Yeah, if I may be so bold, the music in this was pretty unmemorable to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I kind of want to hedge my bets because atmospheric music really does have its place. I've played a lot of games that have music that I couldn't remember a tune from, but it was great while I was playing.
Yeah.
8-bit chiptunes are not the only best case scenario for video game music, Right.
Not everything's Mega Man X.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Would that we were so lucky. No. But yeah, it serves its purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Like, it does the thing that a cinematic soundtrack should, where it sets the mood and the tone of the scenes that it's in. The music some of it has a curious type of quality to it that helps out when you and Trico are kind of exploring around. So it gives a little bit of personality to the characters too. But you are right. It is a soundtrack that I played the whole game and I don't have any of these songs stuck in my head, which is not an indicator of quality or effectiveness for a soundtrack. But I think that the way, and this is something that I should find better words to convey. I don't have the vocabulary to describe why it's an effective soundtrack when it's not catchy.
Right.
But it is. And I think that video game music did come from a place a long time ago. And then with, a lot of newer games too, the signifier for a lot of people, myself sometimes included, of a great video game soundtrack is something that gets stuck in my head and that I want to listen to outside of work, which is not fair. But this game kind of made me think of that as I'm putting notes together. I'm like, I don't remember anything about this soundtrack 3 weeks after I beat the game. So I have to go listen to it on YouTube. And then I remember, yes, this track fits with this type of story moment or this type of environment. So it is doing its job. And I feel like I just don't have the words to describe what it is actually doing.
You might say that the soundtrack of this game is inextricably linked with the gameplay in the exact same way that Trico is inextricably linked with the boy.
There we go. That's a good way of putting it.
That is my single most charitable way to put it.
Yeah. But it is effective for adding an extra layer of emotion or feeling onto story moments that are happening.
Yeah, and it knows when to get out of the way so that you can catch all of the other audio cues.
Yeah, 100%. And so saying that means that it did do its job. And then the fact that a lot of the game has no music is an artistic choice as well. The same way that, horror games will do this. From Software is another developer that does this a ton to great effect, where no music is just as effective as maybe something intense.
Yep.
It lets your mind wander.
Exactly.
So we are at the end of the non-spoiler section of this episode, so we'll do the wrap-up the way we always do. So we'll ask the question, Chris, who would you recommend play The Last Guardian? Who do you think this would appeal to?
I've been thinking a lot about this, because this game, it's hard to think about who exactly the ideal audience is. This is the amount of friction here, I think, is going to put off somebody who comes into it expecting a traditional third-person action. The amount of action, I think, is going to put off somebody who comes into this expecting a puzzle platformer. There is combat here. And for anybody seeking a really fancy virtual pet, I think the Trico does fulfill that role, but all of the stuff around it is going to put somebody off. So all of that being said, I would recommend that almost anybody try this game, because it's so singular that I think if this hits you just right, it'll be amazing, and you will not know until you're playing if this will hit you just right. Like, just watching this, watching gameplay of this is surprisingly dull. Just watching somebody push barrels around or Trico jump here and there. Once it's in the hands, you get that level of interaction with Trico, and I think that is the emotional core that could connect to pretty much any player who's willing to get over that initial friction.
Yeah, there is an amount of friction and frustration that you're just going to have to deal with in this game. And as with anything that has that, like, your mileage is going to vary as to how much that detracts from the experience. For me personally, it did not really, except for like maybe one or two sections that are very short-lived where I just could not progress. I couldn't figure out how to do it. Other than that, any frustration I felt directly tied into characterization and storytelling in a really, really effective way. So I agree with you. There are a lot of like caveats to the experience of playing this as like a pure gameplay experience or as a pure, if you come to this expecting one of those very cinematic, very light gameplay type of games, that's not this. This is not one of those games.
It's unique.
Yeah, it is a really unique experience. And for that reason, it is something that I would recommend to basically anyone who thinks that anything that we've talked about sounds interesting. The way that they're characterizing these two, the boy and this animal through gameplay actions and body language and animations and things like that. If that sounds interesting to you, I think that part is a home run. And again, this game was pretty magical in my experience. And I really loved the experience of playing this. So it definitely feels like something that anyone who wants to appreciate video games as art or play another game that is appreciated as art should play this. And anybody who likes those types of games where the storytelling is enhanced by the fact that it's an interactive experience, that's definitely this game as well. It has all of these, wonderful qualities about it that, if I were to sit and make a list of why I love video games so much, like, this game checks a bunch of those boxes. So yeah, really, really easy for me to recommend. I love this, and I am very excited to see what they come out with next. And if it takes them another 10 years to come out with something else, I'll be there when it's out.
Me too. If I could add just a note of caution to listeners, and feel free to cut this out if it verges into spoiler territory.
Okay.
I would caution listeners, if you are the kind of player or reader or viewer that really wants the mysteries wrapped up by the end, if you want concrete answers to all of your questions, this may disappoint you. This does end up being a somewhat ambiguous experience with the hard details of its world and mythology.
Yes.
So I love that. I come to art and enjoy things left a bit ambiguous. And the emotional core does have a resolution. But, if you're the kind of person who is frustrated that the background lore is not explained, this may not be for you.
Yeah, you'll start out the game with a certain number of questions. What is this place? What is it here for? Who made it? Who am I? Why am I here? You'll get the answer to like 2 of those questions.
Yes.
And that's about it. And the rest of it, I am not actually sure how much concrete information about some of those questions there actually is. I don't think that the game will explicitly tell you much of anything. I am not sure how much that lore hounds have been able to uncover. There might be a bunch of this, like you said, lore and world history that is just in the creator's mind and is not ever going to be told to you. And I'm okay with that too, because the important things were explained to me personally. And then that emotional core is a very complete experience too.
Exactly.
Yeah, agreed there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go off into spoiler land, we have some housekeeping to do, and as we always do, we'll start with you, Chris, and talk about Franchise Festival. Tell everybody about the show, its concept, and what's going on the show lately.
Yeah, you bet. So since 2020, myself and 2 co-hosts have been running this podcast Franchise Festival. We tackle each season one video game franchise. So season 1 was Legend of Zelda, season 2 was Resident Evil, Season 3 was a combination of the games of Supergiant and highlights from the Sonic the Hedgehog catalog. And now Season 4 is Mega Man.
Right.
So we go in-depth with each individual entry. For Zelda and Resident Evil and Supergiant, we did go, each individual entry. For Mega Man, that's what we were planning to do. And we've shifted the goalposts. Now we're hitting... like at least one title from each of the big Mega Man sub-series.
Right.
With the idea that at the end of a season, even a person who's not played any of the games will have a really nice familiarity with what they are. And we do try to design the podcast to be appealing both to folks who have played the game and treat it like a book club, as well as folks who haven't played the game. One of the best comments that we got way back in season 1 described us as not talking, I think it was inside baseball. You know, we didn't take a lot of assumptions with what listeners would be familiar with. And so consequently, I think the podcast has served as a way for listeners to get into a series that they may have been interested in, but haven't played a game in previously.
Right. Yeah. And it's, first of all, it's a really good show. And I really enjoyed the discussions that are had on the show. It's something that, like, anyone who's listening to Tales from the Backlog and you're at an hour and 20 minutes or whatever this is, like, you obviously enjoy what we're doing here to some level, unless you hate listening to this, in which case, thank you. The stats are all the same.
Can you imagine having the time?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Not me, not my life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're listening to this show and you like what we're doing here, it is very easy to say that you will like Franchise Festival as well. It's the same, type of discussion going on about video games as art, more development history in Franchise Festival episodes than I do on this show, which is always good. Like, I find it interesting. I just don't personally want to. These episodes are long enough on this show.
Right, exactly.
But you all go into that.
I'm a historian by training, so it's what got me into the podcasting game to begin with.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. And I enjoy the the series based approach. And this season, currently, as we're recording, we're talking about Mega Man. And as the day we're recording, just a couple days ago, the Mega Man X episode came out, which is a really good listen. And so by the time you get through a season, you'll have this, well-rounded experience of these discussions about a particular franchise or a developer in the case of Supergiant.
Right.
So it's an interesting idea for a show. The execution's really good. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you saying so.
Yeah. So you can check down in the show notes for a link to easily check out Franchise Festival. And like we said, easy to find episodes that you're interested in. If you like Resident Evil, go listen to the Resident Evil season and so forth. So yeah, down in the show notes, you'll find that.
Oh, it occurs to me, if for anybody not checking the show notes, it's patreon.com/franchise festival is our homepage these days. I totally forget our promo details at times. Flying by the seat of my pants here.
Right. I feel that. Like, sometimes you are these things in the core of yourself because you work so hard on these things. Right. And then when someone asks you to talk about them, you're like, what do I do?
Yeah, what? I'm a deer in the headlights here. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. No, good description of the show, recommended for everyone to check out. So again, down in the show notes, you'll find it. And about this show, you can support this show the same way as every podcast. If you like this episode, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or any others that accept those types of things. That will help people find this episode, and that will also make me feel good, and we want that. So leaving reviews is helpful. Go leave one for Franchise Festival as well, please. You can join the Discord server if you want to join conversations about the podcast, about the games we talk about, or about gaming in general, life, music, movies, etc. We have a wonderful community in there. It's one of my favorite places to hang out on the internet. So again, you'll find an invite link down in the show notes to the Discord server. You can support monetarily at patreon.com/realdavejackson, where you can vote in polls for what games I do on the show. You will get some bonus episodes from time to time. I have a bonus retro gaming series over there called Tales from the Way Backlog.
Yeah, I love that show.
Yeah, thank you. That is an interesting experience for me as someone who doesn't normally go out of my way to play very old games. This is a reason to make myself do it and get those new experiences. And then finally, I have another podcast. It's called a Top 3 Podcast. It is a top 3 list topic draft comedy show. So different vibe, but I think it's a good time, and I think you will too. So with all that being said, we are going to take a break. We're going to catch our breath. I'm going to catch my breath. And then when we come back, it is full spoiler time for The Last Guardian. Okay, we're back, and it's full spoiler time for The Last Guardian, and we're not going to go in chronological order through story stuff. What we're going to do in this spoiler section is we're going to talk backstory, and a lot of that is revealed at about the midpoint or maybe 2/3 of the way through the game. And then after that, we're going to do a kind of talk and loose walkthrough of how the relationship between Trico and the boy evolves, some key moments that help out in that progression.
Yeah.
So, starting out with, what is this place that this takes place in? This impossible fortress. You see it later on, only much later on, because you have a little bit of intro in the boy's village, and then it's screen goes to black, you get that credit sequence, and then you're inside the fortress. So you don't really see for a while how it is this place inside of what looks like a crater, but it's like these cliffs raised up out of the ground, and it has this big tower in the middle of it. So what the hell is this place? That's what we're trying to figure out here.
It's interesting that the world keeps expanding throughout the first few hours, but you never actually feel any closer to your goal.
Yeah.
Each time the world expands, it expands in such a way that your task feels more daunting, not less. Which is a real challenge of world design, I think.
Yeah, for a while, you don't really even know what your goal is. Your goal is just to keep moving forward. And like, you have the idea that I'm not supposed to be here, so let's try to find a way out. But who knows how to do that?
Very dreamlike in that way.
Yeah. And then eventually, Trico starts looking up. There's this tower that Trico is very angry about. So you kind of get the idea, okay, we have to go to that tower. And then when you do finally get that aerial shot of the entire place and you realize the only way in or out is to fly, Trico can't fly. So we're going to have to figure that out too. So little information here for people who didn't play or people who need a refresher. It's called The Nest. Again, the only way in or out is by air. And for most unfortunate souls involved in that means by Trico. And because there are many, many Tricos in the world. At the center of this place is a giant tower where a signal is being sent out. The signal works to mind control Tricos. So you start out with one, your Trico, and then a little bit later in the game, you see that there's another Trico. And then very late in the game, you see there's not a couple, there are dozens of these Tricos out there.
Yeah,
and they're all being mind controlled.
Yeah.
The thing that's helping them be mind controlled is they're wearing these big, great stone masks. And the reason that yours is immune to this is that your Trico's mask got broken in a backstory cutscene that we're going to talk about here shortly. What's actually happening here in the story is that this signal, this mind control signal, is telling Tricos to go out and kidnap people and bring them back to this place, which is why the Tricos have this reputation as man-eaters, because they come in, they grab people, they eat them, they fly back to this place, they regurgitate them into these statues, and that is where the information stops for me. That is where I start theorizing, okay, they're bringing back these people. Why? To what end? So I don't know if you have any insight into that.
Just a little bit.
Okay.
In the same scene where the Tricos, you see that kind of fleet of Tricos come across the horizon and land at the top of this tower and do the regurgitation, which I have to stress is into a statue of a baby bird.
Yes.
Which I think is amazing. They're feeding that baby bird just like a mama bird would.
Right.
The baby bird shoots out I don't know if it's the baby bird or the master, which we'll get around to here in a minute. But it shoots out a barrel filled with light after that goop of light has been put into it. So my conclusion was that the villagers are transformed into whatever is in those barrels, the light that you've been feeding Trico the whole time.
Right. Okay.
Kind of grim, but it felt like a one-to-one correspondence when it happens in the game.
That would also make sense for why those barrels of what I was like, that's radioactive waste in there.
It really looks like it, yeah.
That would explain why those are nourishing to Trico if there's, if it's organic material or something like that. So that seems like a perfect cycle. But the other part of this is the thing that's sending out that mind control signal is this core down at the base of that tower. And it's, some kind of self-sustaining AI core or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a sphere inside a cage.
Yeah. So like the feeling that I got is that this place, the nest, was constructed a long time ago for some purpose. And then whoever built it is gone, but it's still going. Like that cycle is still going on. So I didn't know why. Why are they kidnapping these villagers? What was the original purpose of this? Or maybe the original purpose was something different than feeding the barrels to Tricos or something. Maybe it just became this like self-sustaining loop now that the Tricos can eat the barrels or something like that.
Yeah, that feels very Ueda-esque. That reminds me a lot of the world in Shadow of the Colossus, where you're dropped off into this world by people who live outside of it. And the scale of it, the architecture of it, even the residents of it, the Colossi, feel crafted to a purpose that no longer exists. This is some kind of ancient thing that your people are peripherally aware of. It reminds me of the idea of, like a tribe in Europe happening upon, like Roman ruins in the 600s or something. There was this vast infrastructure that existed that the current residents don't have the written history to understand.
Right.
So that's what I get out of this facility as well. It's just been, it's a vast, maybe, a vast institution that has proceeded on long past whatever purpose it had.
Right. And then imagine that those ruins, like imagine explorers uncover ruins in the Amazon rainforest or something like that. But also there is a sentient AI inside of it that's sustaining this like cycle of life and stuff like that. So I don't know, this might be unknowable. This might be unanswered. I'm not sure. And I'm cool with it being unknowable and unanswered. I think that the simple fact that, number one, this is not important for the true story, in my opinion, of the game. This is backstory, and this is something that you have to overcome at some point. But the reason why it's here is not going to make or break the experience with the game, unless, like you said earlier, unless you're the type of person that absolutely needs to get those answers in order to appreciate the experience that you had. But I'm personally satisfied with just the idea that this place was constructed with a purpose, and then whoever built it died out. There's not a single living thing. All the soldiers that you mentioned earlier, they are empty armor shells that are animated by this energy. So it seems like it's just someone built a perfect self-sustaining machine, and then they died, and then the machine persists forever on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about all there is to it.
Yeah, maybe it would be a bit more satisfying if I knew why they built the machine, but I also didn't do a lot of research about that. Maybe there is an answer out there.
A lot of this game carries kind of the language and weight of myth, and to that end, I think under-explaining is more valuable than over-explaining.
Right. I agree, yeah. Because sometimes the answer that you get would be worse and less satisfying than not knowing. So we have the Tricos that are bringing the people to the nest. And then we find out in a cutscene about halfway or 2/3 of the way through that this is how the boy arrived. And it was no other than your Trico that flew to the boy's village during the night while he was sleeping, sneaks up, again, like that cat-like aspect to the Tricos. It's impossibly big, but can stealthily move up to a second-story window, reach in through the window, swallow the boy, and I think it only I think it wakes up one other person in the dormitory because it like accidentally knocks something over or something like that.
Yeah, and as far as I could tell, it was because a caretaker lady comes into the room.
Oh, right.
Sees it, startles it, and that's when it knocks the thing over.
Right.
So it would have managed to do this silently if she hadn't stumbled upon it at the time.
Right. So Trico goes in, he grabs the boy, he swallows the boy, which he does several times throughout this game.
It never gets less silly, I have to say. Him swallowing the boy is perpetually a little funny to me.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way that ruins the emotional heft, but it is pretty funny. This
is the best way to transport these people for long distances is we're just going to eat you and throw you up later. So
all Tricos have a little protective sac inside their beak. Right. We just never see it.
Yeah. So key thing about this cutscene, right before the Trico eats the boy, they have some kind of like psychic connection where Trico's eyes are purple. That's the telltale sign of mind control happening. The boy's eyes also turn purple. I was never clear on what this means unless the boy is special in some way.
Yeah, that let him be among the chosen ones.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Yeah, it's unclear, but maybe that his eyes glowing was an early indication that he may be among the chosen ones. Again, whatever that means. I guess the people who survive.
This has been going on for a long time, so obviously myth and legend in this land would have that sometimes Tricos come and they take people, and they are probably unclear on what happens after that. Mm-hmm. Whether they're just eaten or used for some other purpose, which ends up being the truth. The people in the village probably don't know because no one can go to the nest. So
yeah, it's plainly hundreds of miles away. We see Trico fly
right.
Basically from nighttime until almost dawn, it looks like.
Right. But even if their village was right next to the nest, like no one can go in there, so no one can see what happens. So they could, invent a myth about it, basically. So if a Trico comes and takes the child, then the child is one of the chosen in that way. That's what I took from this. Mm-hmm. There could be a more, the chosen as in they're going to survive this, they're going to break the cycle or something like that. Who knows? Again,
it did seem that the villagers didn't want the kids to be taken. It wasn't like a sacrificial scenario because they do come out with spears.
Right, they do
against Trico.
Yeah, they do try to fight the Trico off, but they're unsuccessful this time. The Trico grabs the boy, flies away, is flying through a storm, and it's one of the few, like I called earlier, the expensive cutscenes, and it's really striking. Yeah. This one where it's flying through the storm. Lightning strikes down, hits the Trico, and breaks the armor, which would break the mind control thing. The Trico falls down to the ground, and the soldiers, the automatons, they come. You had written a question in the notes that we can assume they're controlled by the core, and I think I agree that they are.
Yeah, it's a good assumption.
Yeah. So they come, they grab the Trico, they drag it back to this room, they chain it up, probably to keep it there until they can get a new mask on it and stuff like that, start that control again. But before they're able to do that, it regurgitates the boy. This is where those strange markings on his skin come from. And then it seamlessly goes into where the game first started. But so it's a really good backstory cutscene that shows you everything that happened right up until the point where you regained control at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
One thing I like about when they show you this backstory cutscene about how the boy got to the place is when they decide to show it to you, you have been through a lot with Trico by the time they show you this. And they show you this at a point where something bad has happened to the boy, and it's like the second time that's happened. But you've been through a lot with Trico. If you've made it to this point in the game, you probably love Trico. Yeah. So then they show you, number one, another thing about how dangerous Tricos are and can be, which kind of, I think, foreshadows meeting other ones a little bit later. And then also, that's your buddy, and that's why you're in this in the first place, is because your buddy kidnapped you and brought you here. Although you obviously know that it's being mind controlled, so you feel bad in that way too.
Yeah, it's a useful expository device. It didn't shake my confidence in Trico.
Right.
I don't know if it was intended to, but I didn't bear Trico any ill will from this.
Yeah,
I think it
yeah.
does really effectively set up that kind of whatever is mind controlling these creatures as the ultimate villain of this piece.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you know from your, I don't know, 6-8 hours ish when you get this cutscene, you know from all that time that Tricos are not by nature these bloodthirsty, dangerous creatures.
Exactly.
Because yours is on your side. You're working together.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. It does show you what the ultimate antagonist of this game is.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of walk through that journey and that relationship between the boy and Trico. First thing early on that I noticed that I thought was really effective is early you get an item. It's a magical mirror shield that can reflect light, and whatever you reflect the light on, Trico will use his magic powers and shoot lightning at it and break it or whatever.
Out of his tail, critically.
Out of its tail.
For a later event, yeah.
Yes, for later, yeah. But I got the distinct sense that doing this hurt Trico somehow, so I was never like willy-nilly about using it.
Do you think it may be because he was struck by lightning as an inciting incident to the game, and so seeing lightning worries him?
It could be. Yeah, it didn't seem like a pain vocalization now that I think about it, but
yeah, like
a
fear.
Scared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, scared vocalization.
Interestingly, we never see any of the other Tricos do this, I don't think.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Because they don't use it, because there's the big Trico fight later.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them, and we don't see this for sure.
Yeah, it's neither here nor there. It's one of those kind of like lore speculations. It makes me wonder if him being struck by lightning was part of it, or that the masks in some way inhibit their ability to do this. But all of that's pure speculation.
Right, or that they all can do this, but you need this shield to, or this reflective light, or so, because the shield is, you get it out of like a tomb, I think.
Yeah, and he never does it when you aren't pointing the shield at something.
Right. So just a nice, interesting touch, and then they take that shield away from you for most of the game, and it doesn't come back until the very end.
Wild swing to tutorialize something that they take away from you for 80% of the game.
Right. The reason it gets taken away from you is the first of 2 times in the game where you come across these cages, and they just look sinister, this sinister technology here in these cages. Up until this point, you've basically been able to get Trico to go wherever you want. Maybe it's a little bit of a struggle to get him to listen, but you get it done. And then you come to this cage, you have to jump down into it, and you can see immediately like Trico's freaked out by this place. Yeah. So it makes me think that they're doing something sinister to Trico's in here, and this one remembers what's going on here.
Yeah, you get a real bad vibe from this room.
Yeah. So you convince Trico to jump down, it immediately, like, I guess they don't need a mask. Maybe it's so strong, like the signal inside this cage is so strong that, well, it doesn't mind control Trico. He just freaks out and goes into this like berserk state.
Exactly.
And he eats the boy again, and the mirror shield is gone.
This is the first time you get eaten. So when this happened, I thought, shucks, I guess that's game over.
Right.
But
yeah, I didn't solve the puzzle right. But no, it's supposed to happen. So this shows you that Trico is susceptible, we'll say, to stuff in the environment. Because then right after this, you get your encounter with the first Guardians, and Trico wakes up from this whole ordeal, the statue Guardians,
right,
and fights them off. So you see how Trico reacts to them. But it's just really interesting adding like this mystery to the world. Like, what is this place? Why does it affect Trico like that? Why did he freak out? He ate me. Why did the boy wake up from being eaten? I think maybe I'm getting this mixed up with Eco. This is in this game, when you get eaten, when you get picked up, it is this game. When you get picked up by one of the statues, the soldiers, you have to like mash the buttons to...
Exactly, yeah. All of this distortion appears on screen, like runic distortion.
But it's really heavy when Trico eats you, and you have to like do that to wake yourself back up.
Right. Yeah, and weirdly, I guess this is kind of a mystery that we get an answer to, that it is that master exerting its control over the Tricos.
Right. But like, I don't know if it's like too concentrated here or I don't know, maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe they wanted, because everything in this place after this point is out to get you, the boy.
Right.
So maybe it was telling Trico just, hey, freak out, eat this kid.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure. It is funny when you find the second one, too, that it's a functionally identical room.
Yeah. Well, they got different mind control stations around the fortress. Yeah.
Yeah, no quadrant without a mind control station.
Right. So that's just a little wrinkle in your early journey with Trico is everything was going smoothly until he literally eats you because of this place. A bit later, you go outside. There's a cute scene where Trico takes a bath in a pool of water, like wonderful like animation that they never use again in the whole game.
Yeah.
But suddenly he gets freaked out, and you can see way up high there's another Trico. That's the first sign, and they both very clearly are not fond of each other. Like Trico roars up at the one above is roaring back down. It's a little peek into like the dynamics between Tricos here. Like, I don't know if they're territorial. I think they are territorial, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be like a species that works well in teams or groups.
No, and this really spooked me because we have come far enough at this point to see what our friend Trico is capable of when it doesn't like something. You know, it destroyed those statue guardians and briefly ate us. So knowing that that there's another one out there is a pretty big threat.
Yeah. And you do come more face to face with that one a little bit later.
Right.
So we kind of yada through like a couple hours of game where you're just climbing tower to tower, bridge to bridge, stuff breaks, Trico jumps, etc. All the while you're building up this camaraderie with Trico. They also introduced those stained glass things.
Yeah.
That, again, they never explain why, but the Tricos are terrified of them. So they're set up in places where they don't want Tricos to go. They set up these stained glass eyes.
Yeah, clearly crafted by hands that are no longer in the picture. Like, Tricos could not have crafted these, the master couldn't have crafted them. We never see anything of the statue guardians that suggests, you know, they have kind of careful dexterity. These are probably something from the ancient past.
Yeah, 100%. So they're kind of set up tactically around, and a lot of the puzzles later in the game are trying to get rid of these things so that your Trico will then calm down and move past where they were.
Yep.
So one of the ways that the boy has to help Trico, whereas the Trico's helping the boy out with combat situations and high ledges and stuff like that. So you come across that second Trico, and there was a section right before you get to the opposing Trico, I guess we'll say, where there's a point where Trico jumps on this pillar and everything crumbles around him, and you have to like lower a drawbridge down, and a bunch of these guardians come out and they're all throwing spears at Trico where
it's awful.
Yeah, he's trapped on he has nowhere to go, so he just has to sit and take all these spears, and you're hurrying to solve this puzzle to lower this drawbridge down. Really feel bad for your buddy when that's happening.
Yeah, that was really harrowing. It really puts whether the time limit is real in kind of in-game fail state terms, it really puts kind of a time limit in your mind for getting that drawbridge lowered. Yeah.
So eventually you do, and there are other sections where you have to, I guess, make quick work of a puzzle because Trico is getting attacked or holding off enemies while you're trying to do that. You meet the other Trico. There's a fight. Your Trico loses. You fall back down. Trico gets hurt. We're in the spoiler section now. So Trico doesn't die in the game, but Trico does get hurt often. And it always feels bad when that happens.
I was wondering, because this is the kind of thing that's like a make or break for potential players. And frankly, when I got this back in 2018, I looked up beforehand to make sure that Trico survived.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of those people, you know, and so Trico's survival is kind of a contingent factor for me playing or maybe somebody playing, but it is very heavy spoiler territory.
Right, yeah. And I had always heard that this game is very sad. And everyone say that like, oh, I was a wreck when I finished this. So I was like, okay, Trico's probably going to die.
Yeah.
But he doesn't, but he does get hurt often. So these falls, these fights with other Tricos, like your Trico is younger and less capable than some of the other, I think younger because of the lack of flying capability, or maybe that's just injuries.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Because he does fly in the flashback.
That's right, yeah. But your Trico is not really a match whenever there's a fight between Tricos.
Right. Yeah, Trico takes a lot of punishment over the course of this game.
Yeah, and it always feels bad, and sometimes you can do something about it, and a lot of times you can't, and it's just a part of it. Speaking of punishment, right after this, you get to another one of those mind control cages, and Trico eats you again.
Yep.
And this is where you get that big flashback cutscene. Then when you wake up, this time, the first time you woke up and Trico was still kind of asleep. This time, the boy is not waking up, and it's Trico's turn to help him out. So I thought this was, number one, really affecting because for a while, the boy is just laying there. He looks like he's dead, and like Trico's like nudging him with his paw or with his nose.
Yeah, Trico's
like,
crying
at
too,
him
I
and stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, the noises, you can tell he's very distressed by what's going on. Really sad. And it shows you that you, and therefore the boy, care about Trico's well-being. But now you see Trico really actually does care about your well-being.
Yeah.
And not just, because like before this, Trico attacks the stuff, but he's like, I don't know, by nature attacks those statue soldiers.
Yeah. And you feel like you may be collaborating just because you each have the same purpose, which is to get out of the space.
Right. If Trico's even intelligent enough to realize that, right? But you're right. Like in this scene here, you can tell Trico does actually care about you and is really, really distressed when it looks like you're dead.
Yep.
So what's Trico's solution to waking the boy up? He puts him face down in a pool of water. It works.
Yeah, it works. You can't argue with the results.
Yeah. The ends justify the means, I guess. But that was a really nice, touching scene here. And from this point on, you know that you're not only do you have the same goal, but both characters care about each other.
Right.
So there's a scene after this where you are getting close to the tower where Trico flies for the first time, and it's a nice moment. He's not in control of his flight, but he does fly and kind of crashes into the side of a tower. But he does fly, which is progress.
Yeah, it feels so good for a second. Like you kind of hold your breath. Like, oh my goodness, he actually can fly. It's very nice.
Yep. After this, there's a section where the boy gets stuck in the lair of another Trico, and then your Trico busts in to help. And then there's another section where your Trico fights another Trico and loses badly, and is very badly hurt. And I thought this was a nice touching moment because, as we said in the non-spoiler part, Trico's a shy eater and will not eat if you're nearby. But in this scene, he's very badly hurt. You find some of those barrels, and he eats them out of your hand. It was really sweet.
Yeah, I really like that scene. It was a nice improvement as well on the immediately preceding portion, where you have to roll around in a cage as the boy.
Oh yeah,
and boy howdy does that not work. That was one of my least favorite. Yeah,
yeah.
So it's nice that this came along to redeem that section. It also serves as something of a non-traditional boss battle almost. This combat encounter that the two Tricos are having, because we end up needing to interact with the environment, solve some puzzles.
Yeah, you're like pushing stuff from above, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In the end, I think we slam the enemy Trico's tail in a gate first. Yeah. To give our Trico a little bit of space, and then end up dropping a big structure on the enemy Trico's head, which dislodges its mask. And from that point, it's not aggressive anymore.
Right. Yeah. So again, I think that everyone knew this by this point, but the masks and whoever's making the masks, that's the real evil here, not the other Tricos.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you have to nurse your Trico back to health. And kind of similar to that earlier one where they thought the boy was dead, another like very touching scene where you see the growing trust between Trico and the boy, where Trico finally eats out of your hand, and then he throws up the shield. And you can get the shield again. You have it for the rest of, not for the rest of the game, but for another section where you need it for puzzles and stuff.
Yeah.
Very animal-like. I don't know. Just think about like, I don't know, you might be having a nice time hanging out with your dog and then he just fucking throws up for no reason.
Yep. That's dogs. Yeah, you never know what's going to be in there either.
Yep. Yeah. Could be a shield. Yeah, he's had it the whole time. I think you're onto something. I think Tricos do have some kind of storage pouch down there.
Yeah, the bonus gullet.
Back to the story, you make it to the tower. There's a puzzle sequence inside the tower that I don't really like. There's a sequence where you have to like get these masks, put them on these statues, charge up the power. You have to like raise an elevator up.
It's very long and we're late into the game at this point. I don't know. If this was cut, I think it would have improved things.
Would have been fine. Yeah. One cool part about that is you are down below where Trico is because he can't fit. And you have to climb down his tail to get down into that section. There's a bunch of the enemy soldiers down there, and you can deal with them by using the shield to get Trico to shoot lightning at the statues, which makes it a lot easier, but it was not fun until I figured that out. Anyway, yeah. So you get back to the tower. Trico actually flies, like for real this time, flies. You get to the top of the tower. It feels like you won, basically.
Yeah.
And there's an amazing sunset happening, and the boy and Trico kind of like go out to the edge. They feel like they just kind of sit and take in the view together for a second. And then the mind control beacon rings out and a bunch of other Trico arrive. So you didn't win quite yet. They arrive. They've all got people in their pouches, their gullets. They throw them up into the statues. And then they come out, they sniff at your Trico. So like just good, like animal behavior animation. Like who's this outsider here? Who's this? What do we got
feels
here?
very
Smelling
real.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they turn their attention to the boy, which has been the mission of everything that's not your Trico in this place is the boy. So Trico defends you, but it's like there's like a lot of enemy Trico here. Like it feels like it's an unwinnable fight, but he's taken on the challenge for you anyway.
Yeah, it's like 14-on-1.
Yeah, it's brutal. And they whip his ass. Like it's not a close fight. Like he gets overpowered very quickly. They're all biting at him like really savagely. One of them rips his tail off. Like I think this is the scene where people who said that this game was like really sad or disturbing in that way might be referencing this scene because he's getting brutalized.
Yeah, his tail getting ripped off is pretty rough.
Yeah. They throw his tail down into the center of the tower, and down at the bottom of it is where that core, the master, as you've been calling it. Is that like a thing from a wiki or?
No, I think they refer to that in the game.
In the game? Okay,
it's the narration voiceover when you first encounter it. I think the boy's narration says like, it's the master of this place.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So more of a title than a name. you know.
That sounds right. It's literally just I didn't write it down. So
Yep.
So while Trico is getting like just torn apart by these enemy Tricos, you have to figure out what to do next. And it took me a minute, but what you have to do is you realize that Trico's tail, even though it's severed, can still shoot lightning. So you have to throw it down to the bottom of the tower, go down and have it shoot lightning at the master, at the core, and destroy it.
I thought that was a really creative solution. As tough as it is in the moment to figure out, I think it's a pretty elegant solution to the puzzle.
Yeah. And again, it's another one of those sections where like I felt like an extra source of panic in that situation because you can always see on like one side of the scene all of these Trico just tearing your buddy apart. So you're like, fuck, I got to figure out how to do this like quickly.
Yeah, the pressure's on.
Yeah. And I don't think you can lose. Like, I think if you just sat there, it would just play out indefinitely. But you do feel that source of panic. So it's an effective part.
Yeah, you'd have to have a heart of stone to stand there and listen to your buddy get wrecked.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah. So you go down, you destroy the tower. The release of energy from destroying it badly injures the boy. And then your Trico, as badly injured as it is, he uses his last remaining strength to come over and grab the boy. And I should also say that the release of this energy and the destruction of the master causes all of the other Trico to drop out of the sky, or forget what happened to the ones that were actually fighting your Trico.
You can see them, they like back off of the rooftop and fall off the side of the tower.
Yeah, like in an unnatural way, like with no concern for where the edge of it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was interesting. Like the masks still had this power over them, even though the mind control source was over. They didn't just snap to.
No.
They just stopped working.
No, it's like they just got a blue screen or something.
When
the mind control turned off. You know, if only the masks had fallen off of them, they may have survived.
Yeah. So what happens at the end here is really sweet, I thought, and really effective for a lot of ways. So your Trico uses his last remaining strength, picks up the boy, and flies with the boy in his mouth to the edge of the crater. And like, as I remember, like barely makes it there. Kind of scrambles up to the edge, and you're like, okay, so what are they going to do now? So Trico swallows the boy again and flies back to his village. I guess that shows you some level of intelligence for the Tricos too, even though they're being mind controlled. Flies back to the boy's village and like crashes, like a plane crash, into the village grounds, basically. It's used all of its remaining strength to fly, and it doesn't have any energy left to land. And so the villagers run out. Understandably, they attack, or I don't remember if they attack or if they're just menacing.
Yeah, they at least surround it. I think they don't start to attack until a little bit later in the scene, but they are poised to attack anyway. Right.
And then Trico spits the boy out and kind of with his nose pushes him toward the village chief. So another intelligent gesture from Trico, like to the best of his ability, saying, "I come in peace, please take care of the boy."
Right.
And then the villagers, again, understandably, like rush at Trico with spears, and the boy then uses the last of his strength to very weakly give the call for Trico to leave. And it's really sad because it's one of those things where he's like, you know, I think the boy would rather him stay.
Oh yeah, of course, they're buddies now.
Live together in here, but they're going to kill you, so you have to leave.
Yeah, there's no, that society's familiarity with that species is one of danger.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've talked a lot, like saying what happens in this last section, from the fight on top of the tower to the flight away from the tower to the landing and then the scene in the village. What did you think of all of this and how this kind of wraps up here?
I really like this. Games like this, I think, struggle with their kind of final encounters, games that are more puzzle oriented. And mechanically, I think this works really well to give you that threat of all of the other Tricos, have you complete a puzzle to solve this with the mirror rather than, some kind of goofy combat challenge like maybe a lesser game would. And then I think the degree to which it shows Trico using the last measure of his strength and the boy using the last measure of his strength each to save the other.
Right.
Is the most powerful way that the emotional core of this story could have resolved.
Agreed. At the point in their relationship at the end of the game, it seems like the only thing that each of them care about is each other.
Mm-hmm. Again, a lesser story would have had maybe Trico killed by the villagers or die there or something like that, or have had the boy die if they wanted to take a particularly tragic approach. And neither of those would have been as emotionally fulfilling as the two of them aiding each other in their survival.
Yeah, even though both of them put themselves at extreme risk of harm to help the other out. And again, it shows a level of intelligence on Trico's part to do this too, that I think maybe you might not have been sure of earlier in the game.
Right.
That that Trico actually has the capacity to care about the boy like this, but also to have ideas like, I'm going to take him home. I remember where his home is. Stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that due to the lack of communication is so core to this game, and it's so core to Ueda's work in general. And because you can't communicate directly with Trico, the entire game you're learning about him, even as we see him learning about the boy and coming to like the boy. And so even until the last moment where the boy and Trico are together, the boy and the player are learning about Trico. Trico is more intelligent and empathetic than we knew. Yeah,
100%. And the last part of this scene is, so the boy tells Trico to leave. He uses, he's had like 30 seconds to recover. Then he uses really what feels like the last of his strength to fly away. Right. And it's left ambiguous as to if he's going to survive this. And then the credits start rolling. So you are really like, is this how this game's going to end? Is this going to leave with this uncertain fate for Trico? Because the last thing you see before the credits roll is him really struggling to fly. And you're like, he's not going to make it. Like, he might get out of the village, but how's he going to find enough food and whatever to recover from this?
Yeah, I was really worried that it was going to end here before credits, but thankfully we do get a nice little post-credit scene.
Yeah. So after the credits, it shows you the mirror that's buried in the dirt after a long time, and this is the same as the main menu. So it fades into the exact same setting that the main menu takes place on. The boy is now grown up, so he survived, and some kids found the mirror. And this is very similar to the scene that happens right when you hit new game at the beginning. Before it fades, you get the opening credits, and then the boy wakes up in the cave. So now the kids take the mirror out, they point it at the sky, and then you get this shot where the camera goes up in the sky, soars through the clouds, goes down into the crater, flies through some caves and buildings and stuff, and into the first room where the game started. And you hear a sound, and then you see a couple of green eyes light up in the darkness. So you see that Trico is alive. I'm choosing to believe that that's our Trico. And not only that, I thought I heard a baby sound in there too.
Yeah, and then a second set of eyes light up down below.
Yeah. So
amazing.
A nice happy ending. And I was very, very happy to see that after how that pre-credits ending went, so ambiguous. And sometimes I like when stories like this leave it ambiguous, or even leave it with an unhappy ending.
For sure,
and then that's it. And you're either left with that unhappy ending, or you're left with that ambiguity. And we'd be on the podcast being like, so do you think Trico survived? Does it matter if Trico survived? Stuff like that.
Right.
They made the conscious decision to put in the scene that says, yes, Trico survived. Will the boy and Trico ever see each other again? I don't think so.
Probably not.
Yeah. But they both had their happy ending in their own way. And I think what we know about obviously the boy, but what we know about Trico, we can assume that Trico will still remember the boy if they ever do meet again, or probably does have the capacity to just think about and remember him.
Yeah, and given the positive experience that both of them had with each other, were these two species, humans and the Trico, to come together again, there may be a more positive interaction between them.
Yeah, and the mind control thing for the other Tricos is
gone,
broken. So assuming that they're not all dead, which is possibility, I guess. Well, this one, if it has a baby, probably found another one. So
yes, and the Trico that had its mask shattered earlier by the boy, we do see it very momentarily when our Trico is flying away from the tower.
Okay.
We do see that other Trico without a mask standing peacefully on another tower in the nest.
Okay. That's cool. I missed that, but that's good.
It's like a split second.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so there is hope for the survival of Tricos as a species. And now that we know that it was the mind control and not necessarily their nature causing them to be these man-eating, terrors.
Right.
Hope that they could live in harmony, because you would assume that as the boy grew up, he would tell everybody in the village and the children that this is the truth about Tricos.
Yeah, and the narration that we're experiencing is presumably him telling somebody about it.
Yeah,
So we know for a fact that he spread that story.
Yeah, that is the kind of narrative framing device, is the boy as an old man kind of telling the story. Yeah,
pretty cool. A surprisingly happy ending for a game that feels like it could have swerved in the other direction.
Yeah, and like I said, I expected it to go in the other direction based on the way people talk around the plot, but just talk about how it left them feeling. And I was, it's bittersweet in a way that, they'll probably never meet again.
Right.
But, I mean, you did have that emotionally devastating ending where the boy is like pleading for Trico to leave before the villagers kill him. Like,
I was really scared.
That was pretty sad.
Yeah.
But you do get that happy ending at the end. Yeah. So I just really like how the relationship evolved. They took turns doing nice things for each other, helping each other out throughout the game. Then they really work well as a pair in like the last maybe 5 hours or so. You can give more detailed commands to Trico. Trico feels like he responds better, or at least knows what you want better. So it shows a better understanding between the two of them. And then, the selfless acts at the end, showing how much they do actually love each other. It's a really great journey showing the relationship between them. And as a pet owner, it really tapped into that love that you have for your pets.
It does, yeah. Yeah, I think it gains a lot based on that, just kind of entering into it. But luckily it's not only that, it also earns it's a very poetically harmonious work. It doesn't do a lot of that really heavy-handed foreshadowing, but a lot of the stuff that you're doing towards the beginning is reflected at the end. The relationship grows steadily over time. It's just really comes together really well. I'm very impressed by this as just this beautiful standalone work.
Yeah. And especially considering, that they had issues in development, and this game could have easily come out, unfinished or a shell of what it was once supposed to be. And I didn't get that feeling at all. Like they did accomplish the vision. So
no, it's surprisingly polished. And even the issues that I have with specifically how the boy controls, they're pretty much the same issues that I had with how Eco or Shadow of the Colossus control.
Yeah, it's kind of their thing.
Yeah. If the game had come out in a svelte 2 years of development, I have no doubt the controls would have been the same.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So anything else that you wanted to touch on before we finish this up?
No, I don't think so. I'm really happy that Tales from the Backlog finally got me to play this game.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to forever, and this was the kick in the pants that I needed.
Good. I'm always happy when I can help out that way, and I'm always happy when I have a really productive and good conversation about it once we're done. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking part in this discussion. This is a a game that I came out with a lot of like feelings about,
Mhm.
both about, how it all works as a game, how it works as a piece of art, how this relationship between the characters work. I'm really happy with how we discussed it in here. So thanks again.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me on the show, too. As a big fan of Tales from the Backlog, it is a great honor to finally be on here and get to chat about The Last Guardian.
Yeah, thank you for that. It means a lot. So, for everybody listening, thank you for sticking it out to the end. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Again, if you want to add your own 2 cents and let us know what you think, you can come in the Tales from the Backlog Discord server and let us know what you think. We'll be happy to talk about the game throughout the week. I always love it when that happens. So feel free to come in and join. And check down in the show notes again for links to Franchise Festival. Go check that show out. It's worth your time. And as always, tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.